Calgary, I came here because I wanted to ski. There's no out. Well, we're here because the world needs us. I really like to argue. I'm also really stubborn. It's completely crazy. It's bananas. So I felt like I had this PhD and a tremendous amount of work experience and no qualifications. In intellectual property, you're arguing that you're different than everybody else. And in regulatory, you're arguing that you're the same as everyone else.
Thank you so much, Sabina, for joining. Welcome aboard Between Meetings. I look forward to have a great conversation today.
This is super cool. I'm looking forward to it too.
The other day I was reading the study from the US, and I assumed that Canada might be very similar to that. So the study suggests that from 1997 to 2017, the number of PhD startup founders in STEM decreased more than by almost 40%. And there are multiple reasons for that. So one of them is that nowadays to run cutting-edge startup actually takes more knowledge, expertise, and that's why it's getting a little bit harder to do that. So another reason is that lots of young PhD founders, they actually make less money, so it's getting not actually appealing option for them to run a startup. And another reason is that they delay entrepreneurship for work experience. Do you second that? And can you share your story from obtaining PhD to running a startup?
There's a lot to unpack in there. I have so many thoughts. Okay, one of them is any startup founder that's thinking about their salary is not a startup founder. So that automatically it's not about how much you make. It's a binary 0 to 1. So if that's important, then that automatically weeds out anybody. And PhDs are really there's a lot of different people that go into PhDs, but it doesn't make a great startup founder, because your PhD is drilling down into something to such minutia. You've achieved near perfection in terms of the knowledge. There's no question. And that is the complete opposite of what you need to be a startup founder. I think the PhD skills help you a lot as a founder. Learning how to critically analyze, moving forward with a plan, changing your plan on the go, being scrappy, making a lot happen with a little. All those skills are very transferable to entrepreneurship. But that fundamental quality of a PhD, wanting to achieve perfection, is not great for a startup founder. So for some people, I think the PhD teaches them that they're not that person. And then it creates a great startup founder, because you realize, I'm not the person to drill down. That's not who I am. And so then you get driven to almost the opposite, which is entrepreneurship. So those are my thoughts on terms of why PhDs, turn into founders or not. I don't know, trends are so hard. Like, the side hustle didn't exist before, right? Now you can make money. You can be an entrepreneur, but not be registered anywhere as an entrepreneur because you've got some sort of side hustle that's making you cash. And so I don't know that there's a lot to read in terms of like a changing trend. I think entrepreneurship has gotten a lot harder, for sure, in terms of the expectations of investors for you to be, functioning as the corporate expectations of today, right? Even just the way you do your accounting, your QuickBooks, and the fact that you can print your financial statements and you've got all this in it. Like, the bar is quite high because of all of the evolution there. But yeah, I don't know about trends. In terms of my own, did you ask me about my own journey?
Yes.
Yeah, it was really one of happenstance, and I used to think that I was just kind of hopping from one thing to another, but then I realized that now I'm pretty firm, and my story is really one of good instinct, gut instinct for my own interests. And so, I went into a PhD because I was intensely interested in what I was doing, and it gave me a lot of freedom of thought which is a lot of entrepreneurship stuff, right? You want to run your own show. That's what a PhD is for a lot of it, right? So that was very interesting. Calgary, I came here because I wanted to ski, and doing a PhD was a way to feed that habit. That's the honest truth of why I'm in Calgary and why I did a PhD. It was a lifestyle choice for doing something productive and cool, but while being able to ski. And then, as you know, I went and worked for, actually first I went in and worked for a Bay Area venture fund that I literally ran into him in the hallway. We had a conversation and started a company that evening actually to do tech assessments. And so that taught me a lot about assessments. And then from there, I rolled into intellectual property at Innovate Calgary. Everything was kind of this, it felt like I was just kind of grabbing onto the next thing. But there's just a lot of instinct in there in terms of knowing what was a fit for me.
Awesome. You have 20 years of medical technology commercialization experience in managing IP, building IP, developing IP strategies, and also obtaining regulatory clearance for novel products. And we know that actually it's the complexity of managing IP and regulatory compliance plays a significant role in bringing innovations and technologies to the market. So fewer roadblocks makes everything easier. Based on your experience, have you witnessed improvements over these years in this domain? And what are the pressing issues right now Canada face compared to other countries?
Yeah, so first, intellectual property and regulatory are fantastic skill sets to bring into entrepreneurship, right? Because it's your most expensive. In your early days, it's a really expensive line item, and knowing how, it doesn't mean you can't do it without consultants, but knowing what you need to do and what consultants is a really excellent thing to have on your team, whether it's the CEO or not, doesn't really matter, but someone on that founding team having deep comfort in IP and regulatory. IP and regulatory are the most diametrically opposed thought processes you can ever have. They're very similar in that you're trying to argue something in both cases, and I really like to argue. I mean, for sport, like I love the process of arguing, which is why I love intellectual property and regulatory, because it's really it's a structured argument. But in intellectual property, you're arguing. You're arguing that you're different than everybody else, and in regulatory, you're arguing that you're the same as everyone else. It's completely crazy. It's bananas. So in one day, you're like literally typing something like, "No one has ever done this before. This is super different." And then you switch, and you're like, "This is exactly the same as what everyone else has done before." Don't pay any attention to us. So the twos are connected and diametrically opposed. Is there change? Yeah, regulatory in particular, and intellectual property. Intellectual property in more of a known way, but both of them are arts more than science. They evolve. They're like language, right? They evolve with precedence, right? So this happened before, now we care about this. Regulatory changes based on new guidance documents or industry issues, failures in the field, and the field evolves, right? There's always a sort of evolution, so it changes all the time, which is why you have to use consultants, even if you have deep expertise in regulatory, because you're never going to know and why you need to use lawyers, even though you can write good patents, because that art is needed to be understood. Canada, I think it's doing a pretty good job of intellectual property in that it's made some large investments. We have some exciting programs here with Elevate IP, and that's a federal initiative. I think there's generally a good understanding among Canadian companies that you have to file intellectual property not in Canada, but where your market is, right? And so I think that was something 15, 20 years ago. That wasn't the case. That was a hurdle that you always had to argue, but that seems to be gone. We need more regulatory expertise for sure. Our regulatory expertise is so thin. And try to find somebody that has regulatory expertise in Health Canada is exceptionally hard. So yeah, we need regulatory expertise for sure.
Your previous entrepreneurial experience with Zephyr Sleep Technologies lasted for a decade, 10 years. That's a long time.
Yeah.
What lessons have you learned?
I learned a lot of lessons. I don't think there's honestly, there's not an hour of the day that doesn't go by where I'm like, I've been in this situation before, I know how this plays out, or I've seen this, and that's fantastic. That really helps. It's a little tough in terms of the team. When at Zephyr, all of us were doing it for the first time, and we all kind of learned together, and that there was a lot of value in that. Now, sometimes it's a little difficult because my team is learning just like I did at Zephyr for the first time, but there's kind of someone always going like, well, you know how that turns out, or this is going to happen, and so that's helpful, but it's also creates a little bit of a, an N of one is not a good example, right? So just because you've seen things before does not mean that's the only way to do it, and so it's a little bit, you have to be a little careful. But the lessons were, Zephyr was an entirely different ecosystem. We had no support. We were like an island in terms of, you could see some far off islands in Edmonton and a few in Calgary, but there was really no ecosystem to speak of to support that company. So the experience was very different compared to the support that we get now. But I think the biggest lesson for Zephyr was just speed. You got to go fast. Like and you try to teach that to the team, like an hour matters, like an hour a day, it all matters, it all adds up, and that day turns into a month, turns into a year, so quickly. So that's the big lesson.
Awesome. And now you're the second time founder. Before you actually jump on this journey, did you have any other thoughts that probably maybe I'll change the career path and consider other options?
I left Zephyr. It was very difficult to leave Zephyr. So I left. I was a co-founder. I left at their peak. Things were going really well. I felt like it was. I was ready to start again in the trenches. When I left Zephyr, I honestly felt like I was qualified for nothing.
Interesting.
It was the weirdest feeling, because you have to understand there was no ecosystem. People weren't just starting companies when I went in, right? It was like, you knew a lot, or you were experienced in some way, and you were enough that you could go out there and start a company on your own. And when I left, I had crazy amounts of experience and understanding, but there's no job description anywhere that I could apply for that I was qualified for. So I felt like I had this PhD and a tremendous amount of work experience and no qualifications. And then it was only when I was introduced to my co-founder and started thinking about jumping into a new company, and then it was really being introduced into the ecosystem, recognizing that, oh my God, I was surrounded by people that knew sometimes more, sometimes less than me, and that there was this support to create this company, that this was a thing, that I realized that this was something we could do. But yeah, it was a devastating feeling to feel like, wow, how could I not be qualified to do any job? Because as a startup founder, you're never, you're not a regulatory person, you're not an intellectual property person, you're not a quality person, you're not an R&D person, you're not a product, you're just all of these things. And so I guess the lesson is, once you start, there's really nothing, it's all you can do. That's it. You're in for life. It's like there's no out.
No way back.
There's no way back. I guess you could become a consultant or something, but...
Tell me, what's Nimble Science and what is the backstory?
The backstory? What do you mean by the backstory?
What's the story behind the company?
Why are we here?
Yeah.
Well, we're here because the world needs us.
That's a good one.
Because without us, the future is bleak. I'm not entirely kidding. I think... Nimble. The basics of it is my co-founder Joseph Wong. He had the real guts to, go down to his basement and make this thing when there was nothing, right? So he's the one that started it, in truth. And he was spurred on by his father, who was a GI doc, and encouraged him to solve this problem of access to the gastrointestinal tract, recognizing that there literally isn't. It's mind-blowing if you think about it, right? We actually don't have access to a part of our body that may or may not control large parts of our life. And we're just kind of guesswork. So he did it, and then he's the one that took it through Creative Destruction Labs, and through that process he was paired up with me to help commercialize it. We wore all the hats for a while. And then, after a few years, we realized that the right sort of setup would be for me to be the CEO and for him to be the CTO. But we very much still, jump all on who needs to get what done at any given time. But Nimble is fulfilling a need for, it's as simple as access. It's like imagine, you get sick and you go get a blood test, right? And then you have this expectation, well, okay, my blood is going to have some information. Whatever's going on in my body, my blood is going to kind of tell me something about that. And so there's this big sheet of all the things that your doctor can check off, right? You can check this level, check that level, see what's going on here, and see what's going on there. And really, the microbiome within the gut has the same potential. It's likely to be a hell of a lot noisier than a blood, just because of the dynamics of that relationship. But we don't have access to it. So it would be like not having access to a blood test, which would be crazy impact to our health. Like imagine a time where your healthcare did not involve blood testing. And it was just kind of like, well, I think you've got something going on, right? And then what? Like check your symptoms, check your temperature. What's the next step, right? Go into surgery with no information? No, you go in with a blood test. So if you leap forward, what the vision, the future that Nimble envisions is it's the same thing, right? We're gonna enable that type of testing, but from an area of the body that doesn't have access to it. And I think the way that we're doing that through partnerships and really recognizing that there's no way that we can realize this opportunity alone, that we need to do this with the world, the experts of the world, and we need to do it in a way that solves their problems. That part is the part that has me super jazzed. I'm also really stubborn, so for me, the fact that this doesn't exist is just like, it kind of has to. It's ridiculous. You can't have a world where you can't have access to it.
So you told me that you like skiing, right? And that's why you moved to Calgary. But in terms of the access to capital, in terms of access to talents, government support, all the policies that we have, growth opportunities, why Calgary is the good place for Nimble Science?
Well, I've drank the Kool-Aid, I think, or I'm helping make the Kool-Aid, whatever the analogy is. I think Calgary is a pretty amazing place right now to grow a tech company. I think there's appetite and there's, you need that sort of momentum groundswell. I think we have that. I think we have sort of a lot of companies around us that are very, in more mature fields that we're not all sort of drinking the same Kool-Aid, right? You can look beside you and be like, you can see a Suncor and a Shell, and you see these big giants kind of owning their space. And I think that's a nice kind of balance to what we've got going on. So I think that the energy in Calgary is fantastic. The talent pool is difficult. That's one of the most difficult things with a company that needs a lot of, different specific expertise. But COVID has created this situation where, very few people need to be in the same room, right? We can think about a remote access workplace where talent is no longer a barrier. Nimble has several, some fantastic U.S.-based investors that really believe in what we're doing and that are really supportive. And there's no, we need to be global. We need to have global reach. That's for sure. We can't be thinking of ourselves as a Calgary-based company, but that has no implications for requiring us to move out of this location. So I haven't seen it as a barrier. I think it's a little different when I hear people talking about it in present day, and I hear people saying like, oh, the investors are suggesting we move, or they're questioning our ability to do this or something. It seems to be more on the therapeutic side, like drug therapeutics, where the path is long and the dollars are huge. You need massive access to capital. I don't know that space as well, if at all, but I think that's where it seems to be more present. On the device space, I don't see it as a problem. I mean, Canada is a very favorable place from a labor market, like in terms of our salaries, the social support systems, non-dilutive funding. All of that is really an asset. We're friendly with I feel like sometimes we negotiate between the European and the American. We have a lot of European partners, and I think they're very comfortable working with a Canadian company, and they've let their guard down a little bit more than they would if we were an American company, but they still feel like they're accessing that US side. So I think Canada has a lot to offer in that relationship of connecting the world. Yeah, it hasn't been. I see it as an opportunity for us. I mean, if it doesn't snow soon, then I'm going to reconsider.
And to wrap it up this conversation, can you please share 3 pieces of advice for startup founders in life sciences?
Only 3.
Can be 4.
I have so many things to say.
Please.
Yeah, I mean, I think, do it for the right reasons. It's not the money, it's not the exit. You have to be entirely focused on the exit because that's your job to deliver. But personally, you can't be in it for the money. You really have to be trying to create something, right? And if you're not, the journey's going to be hard and rough. I think make sure you're doing it for the right reasons, and give it time, but race like hell. Every minute counts, but also recognize that the path is long and that there's work to do. And then, I would say everything is strategy and planning, right? Everything is strategic. What you do, when, how, when you file your intellectual property, when you file your regulatory, sometimes people think there's this playbook where you're just like, well, the first thing you do is you incorporate, and the second thing you do is you file a patent, and the third thing you do, and it's not like that at all, right? There's a lot of strategy in terms of how you manage your resources and how you tell your story, and that's really you don't see enough of that in the early phase. People just think they need to do their checklist, right? And a lot of the community encourages that, right? Have you done this? Have you done that? And you're like, no, I haven't, because it doesn't make any sense. So
thank you, Sabina, for sharing. Thank you for sharing your advice and your story. It's been a pleasure having you on podcast. Until next time.
Thanks.